The manuscript arrived without a return address and without explanation. It was wrapped in oilskin, tied with a fraying red cord, and left on the desk of the university's archival office sometime between midnight and dawn. The security cameras glitched during that exact window, looping the same 12 seconds of empty hallway over and over again. No footsteps, no shadows, just silence. By the time Dr. Elias Morneau unwrapped it, his hands were already trembling. The pages were not paper, but something older vellum, darkened by age, etched with symbols that hurt the eyes the longer one stared at them. The ink was uneven, as if written by a hand that shook with fear rather than age, and scrawled across the first page, in a language Elias hadn't seen since his doctoral research, were 5 words that made his breath catch. The year the world listens. Beneath it, a date. 2030. Elias was not a superstitious man. He was a linguist, trained to dismantle myths and reduce legends to context and translation errors. Ancient prophecies were usually poetic metaphors, retrofitted by later generations desperate for meaning. But this manuscript was different. The language predated Latin, older even than early Greek, and yet it referenced things no ancient culture should have known: orbital cycles, electromagnetic storms, mass communication networks described as the invisible chorus. It spoke of cities that glowed at night like constellations fallen to Earth. And it spoke, repeatedly, obsessively, of a sequence. Not an apocalypse, not a single catastrophic event. A progression. The prophecy was divided into 4 stages, each marked with a symbol Elias would later realize corresponded uncannily to modern icons. The first sign was called the fracturing voice. When truth is split into mirrors and every man hears only himself, the ground will begin to hum. Elias frowned. The passage described a world drowning in competing narratives, where consensus collapsed and reality itself became negotiable. It warned that during this time societies would mistake noise for knowledge and applause for truth. What unsettled him was not the symbolism. It was the timing. The manuscript claimed the first sign would begin years before 2030, unnoticed, dismissed as cultural turbulence. Already happening, Elias thought. He turned the page. The second sign was worse. The sky without warning. The text described the sun spitting fire it cannot swallow, disrupting the invisible threads that bind the world together. It spoke of machines falling silent, of navigation failing, of the sky itself becoming unreliable. Solar storms, electromagnetic pulses. The manuscript described global technological vulnerability with frightening precision and warned that humanity would mistake the event for a temporary malfunction, not realizing it was a rehearsal. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't vague mysticism. This was forecasting. He considered stopping, locking the manuscript away, reporting it as an anomaly and letting it rot in a controlled vault like so many other forgotten relics. Instead, he kept reading. That was his mistake. The third sign took up nearly half the manuscript. It was titled The Quiet Rearrangement. Unlike the others, this section wasn't dramatic. No fire, no skyfall, no sudden catastrophe, just movement. Men will change places without marching. Power will move without banners. The watchers will smile, for the cages will be invisible." The manuscript described economic collapses disguised as reforms, surveillance normalized as safety, freedoms traded willingly for convenience. It warned that by the time people realized what had been rearranged, they would no longer remember where things used to be. Elias noticed something else. Names. Not names of kings or empires, but roles. The speaker, the accountant, the caretaker, the gate. Archetypes that seemed to map disturbingly well onto modern institutions. At the margin of one page, written in darker ink, was a single sentence. "This is when resistance becomes unfashionable." Elias closed the manuscript and rubbed his eyes. It was nearly 3 a.m. Outside his office window, the city glowed exactly like the text had described. Unnatural constellations humming softly, alive with invisible signals. The final section was short, too short. It bore no title, only a symbol Elias couldn't decipher, a circle broken by a vertical line. The final prophecy read, "In the year the world listens, the fourth sign will not arrive as disaster, but as choice. They will be warned, they will be shown, and they will decide whether to remember." There was no description of what the fourth sign actually was. Only a final note, written in a different hand, more frantic, pressed deep into the vellum. "We failed because we thought knowing was enough." Elias published nothing, not because he doubted the manuscript, but because he didn't trust the world to read it correctly. Still, the manuscript did not stay hidden. Within weeks, fragments of it began appearing online. Anonymous scans, partial translations, always deleted within hours, always reposted elsewhere. The phrase, "the year the world listens," began surfacing in obscure forums, then mainstream commentary, then memes stripped of context, turned into a joke. Exactly as the manuscript predicted. Elias watched governments dismiss it as coincidence. Corporations co-opt it for marketing slogans. Influencers turn it into aesthetic horror content. Noise, mirrors, applause. The ground began to hum. In late December of 2029, Elias received a message from an encrypted address. Just 6 words. "You've reached the fourth sign." Attached was a live global feed, millions watching the same announcement, broadcast across every remaining platform at once. No branding, no flag. Just a calm voice, speaking in dozens of languages simultaneously. It spoke of unity, of stability, of a necessary step forward. And beneath the broadcast, barely visible unless you knew where to look, scrolled a single line of text lifted directly from the manuscript. "The choice will not feel like fear." Elias understood then. The prophecy was never about 2030. It was about attention, about whether humanity would finally listen, not to prophets or scholars or warnings, but to the quiet part of itself that recognized patterns before they became prisons. As the world leaned in, eager for answers, Elias closed his eyes. Somewhere, centuries ago, someone had written the future down and begged us not just to read it, but to remember.